At 3:17 in the morning, a modern human can be lying on a memory foam mattress, behind locked doors, in a climate-controlled room, and still think, well, this is it. I'll never sleep again. Meanwhile, our ancestors were trying to rest while hyenas laughed in the distance. Insects explored their personal boundaries, and the nearest emergency service was a cousin holding a burning stick. So why does sleep feel harder now? The obvious answer is that ancient humans were exhausted, dropped instantly, and slept like rocks. Except the evidence suggests something stranger. Many people in traditional, non-industrial societies do not sleep dramatically longer than we do. They wake during the night. They shift with temperature, season, age, and social life. The difference may not be that ancient humans never struggled to sleep. It may be that they did not turn being awake into a crisis. To understand that, we have to go back before beds, before bedrooms, and before anyone blamed blue light for ruining civilization. Before humans could sleep comfortably on the ground, we first had to survive the extremely questionable decision to leave the trees. For millions of years, our primate ancestors had a fairly sensible arrangement. Sleep above the ground, away from many predators, on branches or simple nests. It was not luxurious, but neither is being eaten by a leopard, so the reviews were generally positive. Then our lineage became increasingly terrestrial. That created a problem. The ground offered more space, easier social gathering, and eventually access to fire, but it also placed a sleeping animal directly inside the prehistoric food delivery system. A motionless primate is not intimidating. It is an appetizer with hands. Human sleep, therefore, could not evolve as an isolated biological process. It depended on technology, cooperation, and environmental control. In other words, before we invented the bed, we had to invent the bedroom. Fire was one of the most important pieces. A maintained fire provided warmth, light, smoke, and at least some protection against predators and insects. It also created a visible social center. Sleeping near others around a fire meant that danger did not have to be detected by every individual at the same time. One person coughing, shifting, feeding the flames, or hearing movement could alert everyone else. This may have allowed humans to spend less time sleeping than many other primates, while getting more intense sleep during that shorter period. Compared with our close relatives, humans appear to have unusually efficient sleep, including a relatively high proportion of rapid eye movement sleep, the stage strongly associated with vivid dreaming and memory processing. We did not become the champions of sleeping longer. We became better at getting the important parts done quickly. Our bodies also developed strong responses to light and temperature. Darkness helps prepare the brain for sleep, but falling evening temperatures appear to be especially important in many traditional societies. People often begin sleeping several hours after sunset, as the environment cools, rather than immediately when the sky becomes dark. They tend to wake as morning temperatures begin rising. This is not the perfectly romantic image of natural sleep promoted by people who sell linen blankets online. Ancient humans were still cold, uncomfortable, occasionally frightened, and almost certainly irritated by someone snoring near the fire. But their sleep environment matched the signals their nervous systems had evolved to expect: darkness, cooling air, physical activity, familiar voices, and a group nearby. Modern bedrooms remove most physical danger, yet they also remove many of those ancient signals. We lie still after barely moving all day, stare at artificial daylight, control the temperature, isolate ourselves behind walls, and then demand unconsciousness at exactly 10:30. Evolution never agreed to that appointment. The first human bedtime routine probably began by accident. Nobody gathered the group and announced, "Starting tonight, we will establish a healthy circadian protocol." There was no protocol. There was fire, fatigue, darkness, and the growing realization that wandering alone after sunset was an excellent way to become a cautionary tale. Early humans spent their days doing things modern sleep experts still recommend, although usually with fewer predators involved. They walked long distances. They climbed, carried, dug, hunted, gathered, argued, repaired tools, watched children, and occasionally ran because something with teeth had made the afternoon more interesting. By evening, the body had earned its exhaustion. Then the environment began helping. As sunlight faded, temperatures dropped. Activity slowed. Fires were built or maintained. Food was shared. People moved closer together, partly for warmth, and partly because darkness makes every sound feel professionally threatening. That combination may have created a powerful biological pattern. Physical exertion increased sleep pressure. Darkness reduced daytime alerting signals. Cooling air helped the body lower its internal temperature. A warm fire provided contrast, comfort, and a predictable place to stop moving. Bedtime was not discovered as a concept. It emerged as a side effect of surviving the day. The social environment mattered too. Humans are unusually dependent on one another, and nighttime probably reinforced that dependence. Around a fire, people could process the day, exchange information, repair relationships, tell stories, plan tomorrow's movements, and explain why the failed hunt was definitely caused by someone else. Conversation may have delayed sleep slightly, but it also reduced uncertainty. The group was together. The fire was alive. The dangerous world had been pushed just beyond the light. That sense of safety is important because sleep requires vulnerability. You cannot remain fully alert while entering deep sleep. At some point, the brain must accept that it is safe enough to stop supervising reality. For ancient humans, that trust may have come from repetition. The same camp, the same voices, the same fire, the same familiar pattern of darkness, cooling, conversation, and rest. Not perfect safety. Predictable safety. And predictability is one of the most powerful ways to calm a nervous system. This does not mean everyone slept peacefully every night. Storms happened. Infants cried. Predators approached. People became sick. Rivals attacked. Someone almost certainly kept poking the fire long after everyone wanted them to stop. But temporary wakefulness was probably understood as part of the night, not evidence that sleep itself had broken. A person might wake, listen, adjust the bedding, check the flames, hear another person breathing, and return to sleep. No clock, no glowing numbers, no calculation that only 4 hours and 17 minutes remained before the morning meeting. The accidental discovery was not simply how to fall asleep. It was how to build a nighttime world where waking up did not automatically become a disaster. For most of prehistory, sleep left almost nothing behind. Bodies fossilize, stone tools survive. Beds made from leaves and grass usually perform the inconsiderate archaeological trick of decomposing. But at Border Cave, a rock shelter in South Africa, researchers found traces of something remarkably domestic. Layers of grass bedding dating back roughly 200 full-zone years, not a mattress in the modern sense. There were no springs, no adjustable firmness settings, and no salesperson asking whether you sleep hot. Still, this was more than a random pile of vegetation. Using microscopic analysis, chemical evidence, and preserved plant fragments, researchers identified grasses placed in areas where people lived, worked, and rested. Some bedding appears to have been laid over layers of ash from previously burned plant material. That ash may have served several purposes. It created a cleaner surface, helped separate sleepers from the damp ground, and may have made life difficult for ticks, fleas, and other crawling insects. Fine ash can block or irritate small arthropods, which means ancient humans may have discovered pest control long before inventing the phrase pest control. There is also evidence that some plants used at the site came from the broad camphor bush family, whose leaves contain aromatic chemicals that can repel insects. The interpretation must remain cautious. Archaeologists cannot interview the people who arranged the grass. We cannot prove that every plant was chosen specifically as an insect repellent, or that each ash layer was deliberately prepared as the prehistoric equivalent of a fitted sheet. But the overall pattern matters. People were repeatedly modifying the surfaces where they spent time. They gathered plants, carried them into the shelter, arranged them, burned old material, and replaced it. The bedding areas also contained traces of stone tool production, suggesting that these spaces were not private bedrooms. They were multi-purpose domestic zones, a bed, a workshop, a dining area, and probably a place where somebody left sharp objects on the floor. Home. This evidence changes the picture of ancient sleep. Early humans were not simply collapsing wherever exhaustion defeated them. At least in some places, they actively engineered more comfortable and manageable environments. And comfort was not trivial. A layer of grass insulated the body from cold stone. Ash reduced contact with pests. Firelight helped organize the occupied space. Repeated maintenance made the shelter more predictable. Each improvement lowered the number of problems the sleeping brain had to monitor. The archaeological evidence cannot tell us whether these people suffered from insomnia. It cannot reveal who woke at midnight, who snored, or who became furious, because someone had taken the best patch of grass. What it does reveal is a very old human instinct. When sleep was difficult, we changed the environment. We did not immediately assume there was something wrong with the sleeper. This is where the comforting story begins to wobble. Ancient humans lived naturally, followed the sun, exercised constantly, and therefore enjoyed flawless sleep every night. Probably not. Studies of the Hadza in Tanzania, the San in southern Africa, and the Tsimane in Bolivia found that people living without electric lighting often sleep around 6 to 7 hours. Not the mythical 9-hour wilderness coma we might expect. They generally do not fall asleep at sunset either. Evening conversation, food preparation, fire tending, and social activity can keep people awake for several hours after darkness arrives. So the first major correction is simple. Natural sleep is not necessarily longer sleep. It is also not perfectly consistent. Sleep timing and duration can vary from one night to another between seasons and among individuals. Temperature, workload, illness, childcare, hunger, social events, and environmental disturbances all matter. Ancient people were humans, not synchronized woodland appliances. There is also the famous idea of segmented sleep. People sleeping for several hours, waking around midnight, then returning for a second sleep. Historical records suggest this pattern existed in parts of pre-industrial Europe, but whether it was universal, biologically preferred, or directly representative of prehistoric sleep remains debated. A 17th century farmer is not a Paleolithic hunter-gatherer with better paperwork. Then there is an even larger problem. Living traditional communities are frequently used to explore how humans might sleep without industrial technology, but they are not fossils. The Hadza, San, and Tsimane live in the modern world, interact with neighboring populations, face current political and economic pressures, and possess their own distinct histories. Researchers can use them to test hypotheses. They cannot use them as time machines. We also have no reliable way to measure prehistoric insomnia. Archaeology can preserve bedding, hearths, shelters, and parasites. It cannot preserve the thought, "Why am I still awake?" From 80,000 years ago. Ancient humans almost certainly experienced sleeplessness. Pain, infection, pregnancy, grief, conflict, hunger, extreme weather, and fear do not improve because nobody has invented email. The real debate is not whether they ever slept badly. It is whether they interpreted bad sleep the way we do. Modern insomnia often contains a second layer of suffering: anxiety about the consequences of being awake. We monitor the clock, predict tomorrow's failure, search symptoms, calculate lost hours, and become increasingly alert while attempting to force ourselves into unconsciousness. An impressive strategy. Ancient sleepers may have lacked that particular feedback loop. A nighttime awakening could be inconvenient or dangerous, but it was also ordinary. Someone else might be awake. The fire might need attention. A child might stir. The group might briefly talk before settling again. There was no universal prehistoric sleep pattern, no guaranteed 8-hour block, and certainly no Eden of permanently well-rested hunter-gatherers. But there may have been less pressure to sleep perfectly. And pressure, unfortunately, is exceptionally good at keeping a brain awake. A prehistoric camp did not need everyone asleep at the same time. In fact, that would have been terrible planning. If every member of a group entered deep sleep simultaneously, the camp became a buffet with no security staff. But humans differ naturally in when they feel tired, how lightly they sleep, and how often they wake. Younger people often stay awake later. Older adults frequently wake earlier. Infants operate according to a schedule designed by chaos. Put those differences together, and something useful happens. Someone is usually awake. Researchers studying the Hadza found very little time during the night when every adult in a camp appeared to be asleep at once. Across many nights, differences in sleep timing created overlapping periods of wakefulness. This has inspired the sentinel hypothesis. Human variation in sleep patterns may have helped groups maintain informal vigilance without assigning one miserable person to stare into darkness for 8 hours. There was no official night watch rota taped beside the cave entrance. The tribe itself was the alarm system. An older adult waking before dawn might hear movement near camp. A mother nursing an infant could notice a dying fire. A late sleeping teenager might still be whispering with friends while everyone else rested. Even brief awakenings could create scattered moments of surveillance. This does not mean ancient humans evolved specifically so grandparents could detect lions at 4:00 a.m. Evolution is rarely that tidy. Age-related changes in sleep may have many causes, and evidence from living communities cannot prove exactly how Paleolithic groups behaved. But the broader logic is strong. Sleep was social. The group reduced individual vulnerability. Fire extended the useful day, discouraged some predators, and created a place for conversation. Shared sleeping areas provided warmth and made unusual sounds easier to notice. Familiar people nearby offered a kind of biological reassurance that modern locks, cameras, and motion sensors imitate without breathing loudly beside you. Nighttime also became culturally meaningful. Fireside hours allowed stories, myths, gossip, teaching, courtship, planning, and conflict resolution. Some anthropologists have argued that conversations after dark tend to become more imaginative and socially focused than daytime talk. Daylight was for finding calories. Firelight was for explaining the universe. As groups grew larger and settlements became more permanent, nighttime behavior became increasingly organized. Hearths anchored households. Rituals marked transitions into rest. Songs, prayers, protective objects, sleeping arrangements, and rules about who slept were turned a biological necessity into a cultural institution. Sleep was no longer just the moment when the body shut down. It became a repeated act of trust. You trusted the fire to remain alive. You trusted the people around you to notice danger. You trusted that waking briefly did not mean the night had failed. Modern sleepers are often alone with their thoughts, their clock, and the expectation that sleep should arrive instantly and remain uninterrupted. Ancient sleepers may have had more danger outside the circle, but inside it, they had something many bedrooms lack: a tribe. The modern world did not eliminate the dangers surrounding sleep, it replaced them. The leopard outside the firelight became tomorrow's deadline. The hostile neighboring group became a work email marked urgent. The unpredictable night became a glowing clock that quietly informs you that you have now failed to sleep for exactly 2 hours and 43 minutes. Our nervous system treats uncertainty seriously, even when the threat is a presentation scheduled for 9:00 a.m. Artificial light extends the day. Screens deliver novelty long after sunset. Indoor temperature remains almost unchanged. Work schedules demand the same waking time in every season, regardless of when the body became tired. Many people spend their days physically inactive, socially overstimulated, and mentally unfinished. Then we enter a silent room and expect the brain to switch off like a lamp. When it does not, we start trying harder. That is the trap. Sleep is one of the few biological processes that becomes more difficult when pursued aggressively. You can choose to eat. You can decide to walk. You cannot command deep sleep with sufficient determination. Ancient humans probably had terrible nights. They endured pain, cold, insects, crying children, hunger, storms, and genuine predators. But they may not have carried the modern belief that every awakening was abnormal. Every short night was dangerous, and every tired morning required an investigation. Their sleep was flexible because their nights were communal, seasonal, and imperfect. Ours is measured. That does not mean the solution is to throw away the mattress, cancel electricity, and invite several relatives to sleep around a fire in the living room. Your landlord may have concerns. It means remembering what sleep was built upon: movement during the day, darkness at night, cooling temperatures, familiar routines, social safety, and the acceptance that wakefulness sometimes belongs inside sleep. Perhaps ancient humans did not possess a secret technique for unconsciousness. Perhaps they simply trusted the night more than we do. At 3:17 in the morning, the person staring at the ceiling is not a broken version of a prehistoric human. They are a prehistoric nervous system trapped in a world of clocks, notifications, and tomorrow morning expectations. The ancestors outside the cave heard a hyena and thought, "Someone is awake, we are probably safe." We see the clock and think, "I have ruined Tuesday." The hyena may have been easier.